Now, from the makers of cold water Omo...
The bar of the Bull and Bear must be the most exclusive bar in the City of London. It is never frequented by any other than those who make their money in the city. Brokers, jobbers, bankers, etc. all gather there in their sober city dress, and fortunes are made and lost over a glass of sherry. One group, round a small table in the corner, were quite typical. Their names were Todhunter, Boardman, and Jago.
Your sherry, sir.
Oh, thank you. Well, Boardman?
Yeah, you were right, Todhunter. They upped the dividend. And that means, Jago, that you owe me a drink.
I'll sign the slip for sherry.
Very well, Mr. Jago. Here we are. Thank you.
The devil's that? Oh, sorry, men. The drink will have to wait. Wired for sound these days, eh?
Yes, a new gadget. Transistorized communication, a sort of a portable secretary. Henry put me onto it. I think he's got shares in the company that makes them. It's quite simple, really. When my office wants me, they call the answering service, and they transmit the bleep sounds. Well, that's the signal to call them back.
Oh, hadn't you better do so?
There's no need. It's just a reminder that it's time I left for our board meeting. Yeah, come on, Henry. Leave the sherry for Jago. We have work to do.
The Avengers.
And say, once an Omo user, always an Omo user. Because there's just no dirt that can stand up to the cleaning power of cold water Omo. It solves Mrs. Sutherland's washing problems for her.
Very dirty oil or grease marks.
Yes?
If you use cold water Omo, there's no trouble at all. It comes out very, very easily indeed.
There's no washing problem too difficult for cold water Omo. Over 1 million South African housewives have proved it.
Lux is the beauty soap chosen by beautiful film stars around the world. They choose Lux for its rich, moisturizing lather. Lux, a beauty treatment as you bathe.
Episode 1 of this story, in which John Steed and Emma Peel find they have business in the city, which starts when someone attempts to dial a deadly number. The man called Jago grinned cheerfully at Boardman and Todhunter as they left the table at the bar and walked sedately over to an old-fashioned hat stand. Todhunter removed his answering service transistor from his jacket pocket and slipped it into the outer pocket of his heavy tweed overcoat. As he did so, a newcomer to the bar seemed to collide with him.
I do beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. Quite all right. Excuse me.
Todhunter wasn't to know that the man had very skillfully taken the transistor from the overcoat pocket and switched another similar gadget in its place. The two friends left the bar, and a few minutes later they were back in their respective offices. Todhunter once again removed his overcoat, took the duplicate transistor, and clipped it inside his jacket top pocket. Then he joined the others in the boardroom.
I think there is no need to point out, gentlemen, that since the war, full employment and a rising standard of living have become the major economic requirements of this country, accompanied, as is inevitable, by inflation.
Todhunter droned on with his address. Various members, replete from luncheon in the Bull and Bear, fixed an expression of earnest concentration on their faces and closed their eyes. Back in the bar of the Bull and Bear, the man who'd bagged into Todhunter consulted his watch and moved to one of the minute telephones. He smiled grimly as he began to dial a number. In the boardroom, Todhunter was concluding his speech.
Therefore, gentlemen, the future for the industry looks very bright. For our company, I must say the outlook is healthy. Very healthy.
Not so healthy for Todhunter, who at that point swayed on his feet, clutched at his chest, tottered, and collapsed face downwards across the boardroom table, knocking over a water cone. A few hours later, John Steed walked slowly round the boardroom. When Mrs. Peel entered, he hardly glanced at her, but said,
One really can tell a great deal about members of a board from the way they will scribble on the scrap pads. Doodling is the correct word, I believe. Now look at this. Repressed personality. Now, whereas this one shows a deep-seated frustration.
Well, whoever did it has my sympathy.
But this is more difficult. Mysterious. Now, he keeps his desires and feelings to himself. A secretive nature.
You might have drawn it yourself.
I beg your pardon, Mrs. Peel.
I have been summoned here with all urgency and no explanations. Do I have to guess why I'm here? Do you tell me straight, or do we have to play quiz games?
Steed took a folded evening paper from his coat pocket and slid it across the polished top of the boardroom table.
Stop press.
Chairman of Todd Hunters dies. Share prices slashed.
It happened right there where you're standing, less than 2 hours ago.
Steed took a Hunter gold watch from his pocket, flipped it open, and consulted it.
Yes, 2 hours ago.
Well, that's an impressive watch. You?
No, legacy from my Uncle Bertie. It plays jingle bells if you open the back. See?
How useful. Pity it's dented.
Battle of the Somme, 1916.
German bullet?
Canadian mule, actually. Yes, Todd Hunter died literally on this table 2 hours ago.
Look, I'm sorry to appear unsympathetic, but I don't see why it should be of all that interest to us.
He was the 6th company chairman to drop dead in the last year.
Thrombosis. Pressure of work.
Each time, the chairman was dynamic, virtually indispensable to his company, so the company stood to lose a good deal by his death.
Well, it could be overwork. People do drop dead of strain.
Question, did they drop, or were they pushed?
All 6 of them?
Why not?
Motive.
Your guess is as good as mine.
A man dies, share prices drop, company becomes cheaper and therefore easier to take over.
Fine, but for one thing, they weren't taken over.
Well, what next?
A little dabble in high finance.
Oh?
Yes. 6 chairmen with only one thing in common. A banker named Boardman. Now, see if you can get hold of any personal possessions that Todd Hunter had on him at the time of his death. I'll pay a visit to banker Boardman. We'll meet up later. Let's go, Mrs. Peel.
Boardman's, like most merchant bankers, operates from a parlour. A large ornate room with a grate, thick carpets, and 2 ornate desks at opposite ends of the room. The room itself is panelled and lined with portraits and framed accounts. There are 2 doors, one Mr. Henry Boardman's, and the other his partner John Harvey's. When John Steed entered, Henry Boardman stopped signing letters and rose to greet him.
My apologies, Mr. Steed. Will you take sherry and biscuits with me?
Thank you. It's a charming place you have here. Nice to see old traditions maintained.
Yeah, virtually unchanged in 147 years. Since the bank was founded, in fact. Well, you come to us most highly recommended, Mr. Steed. Your bona fide is excellent. Yes, most excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, the nature of your business?
Money.
Yeah, naturally.
Shall we say £1.5 million? All right, then let's make it 2 million clear. Nice round figure, eh? Helps keep the accounts tidy.
Mr. Steed.
Just for a start, of course. We may want to double that figure eventually, but...
Mr. Steed, I admire your attack, but even on the strength of these references, a loan of £2 million would be...
No, my dear chap, no, you misunderstand me. I haven't come here to borrow. I want a deposit.
Deposit? £2 million?
If we can agree on the proper way to invest it. You see, I represent a trust fund set up by one of the armed forces. We have very substantial funds to invest and thought that one of the better merchant banks might be the best way of placing them. More than that, I'm not at liberty to say at the moment. Not until I'm quite sure that your bank is the one to do business with. I'm sure you understand.
Oh, absolutely. You're looking the market over, so to speak.
So to speak, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Steed, I think you have made a wise choice in coming here first. This is your first call.
I can see you're as wily as your reputation, Mr. Boardman.
Can I offer you a cigar? A custom roll?
Oh, no, thank you. No, too early. Yes, I feel at home here already. The air of ordered calm, a feeling of solidarity, of financial wisdom. Oh, I say, did you once have a candle letter hanging on that wall?
Steed indicated an empty space with his umbrella.
Yes, but how did you...
A friend of yours happened to mention it. It was actually he who first suggested I came here. Poor fellow, Norman Todd Hunter.
Todd Hunter, yes, indeed. Tried to do too much, poor fellow. John. Mr. Steed, I'd like you to meet my partner, John Harvey.
How do you do, Mr. Steed? Glad to know you. Did I hear you mention Todd Hunter? You a friend of his?
Well, we were acquaintances.
Pushed himself too hard, to the limit. It's a familiar story these days, I'm afraid.
Yes, very familiar. You have been having some bad luck of late, haven't you? 6 company chairman in less than a year.
Yes, indeed. Well, Mr. Steed, what do you make of us? A bit archaic, you think? Trappings of a bygone age? I'm afraid we still judge the man, if he's a credit risk or not, by the colour of his socks.
Steed lifted an elegant shoe and showed a length of sock.
Dark grey silk with a discreet motive. I hope I qualify.
I'm sure you do. Oh, excuse me.
Oh, by the way, Mr. Boardman, could you put me on to a good broker?
The best. Frederick Ewell. Using myself. This car will introduce you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, and this is my address. I'm giving a little house party on Thursday night. You know, I'd be most honored if you could attend.
I'd be delighted.
Mrs. Peel was having a far less pleasant afternoon. There was no offer of sherry and biscuits at Macombe's funeral parlour.
Excuse me, do you happen to be the gentleman who dealt with the late Mr. Todd Hunter?
The Todd Hunter? No. Oh, yes, the mahogany and walnut, the velvet lined, the solid brass handles, the Gothic style. I prefer the Corinthian fluted myself.
Oh, well, I've come to pick up his personal effects. I have the authority here to remove all he had on him. There won't be an autopsy, will there?
The autopsy? Why should there be? The doctor signed the death certificate. Thrombosis. Why should there be an autopsy?
You didn't notice anything peculiar about the body?
Oh, slight bruise above the heart, that's all. These things are over... Oh, that's funny. It's gone.
What's gone?
One of those bleep gadgets for answering service. It's gone, and yet I took it out of his pocket myself. His top pocket. It was clipped to his top pocket.
About level with the heart?
Yes, I suppose it would be.
John Steed, investigating the strange deaths of several company chairmen, had called upon Henry Boardman, the merchant banker, and over sherry and biscuits had got to know a little of the company's business. He'd met John Harvey, Boardman's partner, and been invited to a dinner party. On the whole, it wasn't a bad afternoon's work. Steed had asked for the name of a reputable broker, and had been put on to Frederick Ewell. That was Steed's next port of call. Ewell's office gave evidence of his favourite hobby, fishing. Cases of stuffed fish lined the walls, and even when Ewell was working, he was sorting out fishing tackle, tying on dry flies while talking on a phone cradled between his jaw and shoulder.
It's declaration day tomorrow. The shares have gone down £1. You have options for 10,000. So, I leave the arithmetic to you. Now, look, the intercom's going. I'll call you later. Yes?
Mr. Steed is still waiting, Mr. Ewell.
All right. Show him in, please.
Mr. Steed?
Come in, Mr. Steed. Come in. That'll be all, Suzanne. Sorry to keep you, Mr. Steed. I understand that Boardman sent you. How is Henry?
Flourishing.
Yeah. Now, what can I do for you?
Tell me, do you know a company called Castle's Tin?
Yes.
Well, Chappie in my club seems to think they're a good speculation.
There are 2 occasions in a man's life when he shouldn't speculate. When he can afford it and when he can't.
Yes, well, thank you for the advice.
That's not mine, Mark Twain. Now, he was another fisherman. There's nothing to touch it, you know, fishing. The thrill of pulling in a really big one. Do you fish, Mr. Steed?
Well, you might say I was always fishing around.
I can't get away as often as I should like, you know. Scotland, the place, you know. Caught a salmon last year, as big as... Well, it was pretty big. Now, can I offer you some
sherry and biscuits? Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Suzanne, see to the sherry and biscuits, will you please?
Yes, Mr. Ewell.
Now, where were we? Castle's Tin.
That's right.
Dirty sort of company.
The friend who gave me the tip's having a lot of success on the market lately, but must admit I don't understand how the shares have gone down every day, but he's still coining it in.
Yeah, can be done.
You can make money out of failure?
Ever heard of a thing called a put option?
Vaguely.
You take a put option when you think the share price is going to fall. You start by selling the shares, the price drops, or you hope it does, and you have an option to buy them back at the new low price. The difference is yours.
Complex. Definitely not for the amateur.
Yeah, very profitable when you pull it off.
The whole thing depends on the shares falling in price. Of course, if you had the means of foreseeing the future and perhaps influencing it...
that would be another thing entirely. What was the name of the company your friend dabbled in?
Todd Hunters.
Stupid of me. Stuck a hook in my thumb.
I understand it was quite a killing.
Ewell looked up from his fishing tackle in mild surprise.
Well, that is the correct term, isn't it?
Sherry, Mr. Yule. I think you should know that Amalgamated Industries are down 2 points. Ben Jago is on the phone. Shall I have him put through to you here?
No. I'll go outside and speak to him. We must buy 20,000 Amalgamated at once. I won't be a moment, Mr. Steed. Help yourself to Sherry. Suzanne will show you some investment prospects while you wait.
Suzanne poured the sherry and handed Steed a glass. Then she took from a filing cabinet a sheaf of papers.
I think I should explain. I'm just a babe in the financial woods. Perhaps you could help me with the finer points.
Well, I'll try.
Steed perched himself on the desk, very near to Yule's secretary. Keep your eyes on the folio, Steed.
This is just a suggested portfolio. It means that your capital would be spread equally through the key industries. So much in steel, so much in oil, so much in industrials, and so on.
Fascinating.
This suggested scheme would mean an initial investment of about £50,000 in round figures.
Round figures, eh?
Not those kind of round figures, Steed.
There really isn't much more to explain. It's all straightforward enough. Our investment suggestions are carefully selected, tried and tested.
By Ben Jago? He is a client of yours, isn't he? His name is banded around the city as a man to watch.
Oh, yes, he's very successful. One of our best clients.
How does he do it? Crystal ball? Foresight? I mean, he does dabble a lot in put options, doesn't he? Always one jump ahead, sensing when the market's going to be just right.
Well, experience, I suppose. Nevertheless, it is uncanny sometimes, like his last success.
Oh, and that was?
Todd Hunter and Company. He took out options a week ago, holding her for 100,000, and it paid off. Still, that's Ben Jago for you.
It was inevitable that John Steed should find his way to the bar of the Bull and Bear. That's where the money action is, and that's where one had a jolly good chance of meeting Ben Jago. A loudspeaker was giving the latest information as Steed entered and headed for a corner table.
Coppers were quietly firm but made a mixed showing. Oils hardened, but rubbers were neglected. Banking and insurance showers were on the dull side.
Waiter! What the devil is a blue chip special?
Oh, it's 1 layer of prawns, 1 a scrambled egg, mayonnaise, and lightly toasted rye bread. I can recommend it, sir.
Oh, good. Now, at least one of us will enjoy it.
A coffee, sir?
Quinoa with just a dash. A vodka to start with.
Thank you, sir. Of course, your shares while you're waiting?
It'll take far too long.
Anything further, sir?
Yes, is Mr. Ben Jago in here?
Oh, yes, sir. There he is, sir. Look, down there at the end of the bar, making notes on the back of an envelope. That's Mr. Jago.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, waiter.
Steed tipped the waiter, casually picked up his newspaper, and noticing a very attractively dressed woman leave Jago's side, moved across to the stool. Jago was still doing calculations when Steed said,
Excuse me, aren't you Ben Jago?
Yes, that's right.
We share the same broker.
Charlie Bingham.
No, Ewell, Brian Ewell.
One can't be too careful. Sit down, Mr.
Steed, John Steed. I do apologize for the interruption.
No, not at all, not at all. They put you into Gibbs Electronics?
Not yet, no.
I see they don't. Don't like the smell of them.
Oh, well, thank you for the tip.
Your vodka, sir.
Oh, thank you. No ice.
House rule, sir.
Really?
Oh, a dealer from Wall Street once asked for a bourbon on the rocks. 2 brokers dropped dead on the spot.
Tell me, Jago, how is all this done? I mean, it's as remote as water dividing to me.
Oh, mainly by guess and good luck.
Oh, I don't believe it. Ben Jago, one of the shrewdest in the city. That's what my guidebook says.
Then it's time to buy yourself another guidebook.
No rules you can offer me?
Buy when they're friendless. Never wrong to take a profit. They're only half-truths.
All of them. How do you know about Todd Hunters, for instance? I mean, that was more than a half-truth.
It was a hot tip from our broker.
Wish he'd told me about it.
Patience, Mr. Steed, patience. There's a devil lot of fiddling before Rome was burned, you know.
Yes, well, just remember if there's a fiddle going on, I'd like to get in on it.
Don't take too many risks. Remember, even Nero got his fingers scorched. Good day, Mr. Steed.
John Steed wondered vaguely what Mrs. Peel had been up to. He hoped she wasn't branching out on her own and getting into trouble. Knowing Mrs. Peel as he did, that was a forlorn hope. She'd been checking on the possessions of the late Mr. Todhunter, and when she'd found out that the transistor receiver that he carried for the answering service was missing, she immediately started to check up. In the foyer of Warner's answering service, she paused at the desk and rang the bell.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm J.P. Warner of Warner's Answering Service. Can I help you?
Yes. I'd like to know more about the service you offer.
Oh, splendid in its simplicity,
Mrs. Peel.
Ah, yes. The scheme operates along the lines of many used in hospitals. Subscriber carries a bleep for his person. And then if he's ever wanted, the machine bleeps and he takes a radio message telling him who wants him and what the telephone number is.
What's the range of this service?
The scheme is, in the main, confined to the City of London.
I see. So it's more or less limited to brokers and financiers, etc.
That's the idea.
At that moment, a man came down the steps. He held a tool bag in one hand. Emma frowned. He looked familiar.
It ought to be all right now, Mr. Warner. Needed rewiring, that's all.
Oh, splendid, Fitch, splendid. Thank you.
Who was that man? Anyone important?
Oh, no. No, Fitch is the resident mechanic. Quite bright. Backroom boy in the war, I'm told. Now, Mrs. Peel.
You supplied one of these bleep devices to a relative of mine, Mr. Norman Todhunter. Tell me, Mr. Warner, did you ever get it back?
Should we have done?
Yes. He died. It's missing. I wondered, did you ever get it back?
John Steed found himself becoming more and more involved in the world of high finance. He'd got to know and impress Henry Boardman and his partner John Harvey. Boardman and Harvey were merchant bankers and completely taken in by Steed's unlimited credit and fantastic letters of recommendation. Steed had got himself a broker, Brian Frederick Yule, and made many inquiries into the business dealings of such city men as Ben Jago, who seemed to have unerring judgment when it came to investments. At a dinner party at the Boardmans, Steed arrived, in immaculate evening togs, rather early. He gazed around the penthouse suite, accepted a drink from a waiter, and turned to John Harvey.
Yes, this man Ben Jago is amazing. The last success he had depended almost completely on the death of the company chairman. It's almost as if he knew that Todhunter would die.
No, that's fantastic. Jago is shrewd, we all know that, but that's too shrewd to be true.
My reaction entirely. No. Here's our host.
Yes.
Steed. Good evening to you. Steed, I don't think you've been introduced to my wife.
No, I haven't had that pleasure.
Ruth, my dear. This is Mr. John Steed.
How do you do?
I'm delighted to meet you.
Thank you. You are going into business with my husband.
Well, let's say he's showing me the ropes.
Oh, you are not in the city.
Not often.
And let me borrow, Mr. Steed. There is someone I would like him to meet.
Oh, pleasure. That's the beauty of parties. One's always meeting people. It's a small world, Mrs. Boardman, isn't it?
Ah, so they say, Mr. Steed. So they say.
Ruth Boardman linked her arm casually through John Steed's and led him across the room to where a beautiful young woman was talking to a group of solemn-faced, white-haired men.
My dear, this is Mr. Steed, another non-financial animal. Mr. Steed, Mrs. Emma Peel.
Delighted to meet you, Mrs. Peel.
Good evening, Mr. Steed.
My dear, is dinner in 10 minutes, all right?
Oh, I will go and sit about it.
Mrs. Peel is another of our clients from Barbados. She arrived recently.
Recently?
I arrived last week.
You surprise me.
Why's that?
Oh, so little tan.
It's the rainy season.
Ah, yes, of course.
Excuse me, Mr. Boardman, you have to make a telephone call.
Yes, please excuse me.
Don't be long now, dear. It is your idea to eat early.
I admire your view. Beauty of a penthouse, of course.
Oh, it is pleasant, isn't it? Restricting, but it is better for Henry. He can have a rubber of bridge at his club and still be home for dinner. You've given up the country house? Alas, yes. Would you excuse me again? I won't be a moment, but Henry is so fussy about the temperature of his wine.
The rainy season, indeed.
Well, it's true. The annual average, 36 inches, half of which falls between September and November. Next question.
How long do we have to wait for the rest of the guests? I'm starving.
One guest at the party was late. It was Yule, the broker. He knew it would be impossible for him to go home and change, and so he'd brought an evening tuxedo along to his office. He washed and changed swiftly, whistling as he did so. It was while he was fastidiously buttoning up the buttons of his waistcoat that he realized it was rather a tight fit. He was puzzled to find something sewn into the top pocket.
What the devil? It's a bleeper! No! No!
Yule tore at the waistcoat, ripping the buttons in an attempt to get free, but the bleep went off. Yule clutched at his chest and fell across the desk, a death exactly like that of Todhunter's. Back at the Boardman's, the dinner party had proceeded to the coffee, brandy, and cigar stage. There was one place, Yule's, which remained empty and untouched.
Typical. A fine broker, but his manners are atrocious.
Oh, there may be some logical explanation.
I was right about the wine, wasn't I, Mr. Steed?
Oh, indeed, yes, Mr. Harvey. And I adore your sherry. And the brandy impeccable.
I thought brandies were judicious.
Not according to the authorized text.
Are you interested in wines, Mrs. Peel?
In moderation, Mr. Harvey.
I was referring to your interest, not your capacity.
So was I.
We have a wine tasting at the bank cellar next Tuesday. If you'd care to come along, Mrs. Peel.
I should be delighted.
Perhaps Mr. Steed would care to attend, too.
Steed produced a miniature pocket diary immediately.
Let me see. You'll say Tuesday next.
Yeah.
Ladysmith relieved 1900. A diary is a lovesome thing. That's fine. What time?
6 o'clock. We'll see how keen your palate really is.
Well, in which case, if I may, I'll leave you and go into strict training.
Just as you wish, Mr. Steed.
Mrs. Peel, can I drop you somewhere?
No. You're not going to deprive us of Mrs. Peel's company.
Oh, we will see she gets home safely.
I have my own car.
Oh, well, I'll say good night then, and many, many thanks for your hospitality.
Thank you, Mr. Steed. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Steed had parked his car in the garage of the basement. It was very dark. Steed's footsteps echoed hollowly as he tried to locate the parking bay. Steed walked jauntily forward, still smoking his cigar. Then he stopped.
That's strange. Cigarette stub. Still smouldering. We are not alone.
Steed unbuttoned his evening jacket and reached for his gun. At that moment, Steed wheeled round. The headlights of what appeared to be a large car flashed onto him. The headlights separated as two motorcycles roared down the length of the garage. Steed dodged the first bike. The sinister rider, clothed all in black leather and goggles, skidded round. The second made for Steed, lying on the ground. Steed threw himself aside in the nick of time. His gun fell from his hand. The bike seemed to be coming at him from all directions. Steed, caught in the lights, made a perfect target. The first bike returned to the attack. Steed whipped off his evening cape and threw it over the head of the cyclist. Blinded, the driver lost control, smashing into a packing crate. Steed sprinted for his fallen gun. The second rider swerved and headed to cut him off. Steed got to the gun, fell forward and fired at the approaching headlight. The headlight went out, but somehow the rider managed to regain control. He roared up the concrete ramp, his footrests striking a shower of sparks. He managed to avoid the doorpost and hurtled away into the dark. Steed recovered his breath, moved to his car, and snapped on its spotlight. Mrs. Peel's voice said,
Pistol practice at this time of the night? Is he dead?
Steed looked down at the body of the motorcyclist.
Broken neck by the look of it. Dangerous sport, motorcycling. Well, let's take a closer look at him.
Steed bent down and removed the dead man's helmet.
Far cry from sherry and biscuits. He was a waiter. Yule's, I think. The Boardmans were pretty anxious that you shouldn't leave with me, weren't they?
Well, you think that they're in...
Yes, indeed. They didn't want you butting in on a little surprise they'd prepared for me.
You're guessing.
Well, I know that.
Well, now what? Go back and confront them with this?
No, I think that first, I'd better have a word with my broker.
Right. Shall we go, Steed? I really think you need a bodyguard this evening.
Applying for the job?
If the pay's all right.
Well, pay's not good, but I'll make sure there's plenty of perks. Let's go.
A short while after that, with the aid of his skeleton keys, Steed obtained entrance to Yule's offices. Yule's body now lay on its back. Papers were scattered all over the room. Steed examined the body thoroughly.
Look, Mrs. Peel, waistcoat pocket.
Ripped away completely.
Yes, that's really what you call having your pocket picked.
Oh, no wonder he didn't feel like dinner.
But he was planning to come. Those clothes. He was dressing and...
And then, not the usual old heart attack this time. At a rough guess, I'd say he'd been dead about 3 hours.
Spoken like an expert.
Oh, I've been taking a refresher course in applied medicine. As a matter of fact, when you called me so urgently to join you on this case, I
interrupted your studies. Never mind. Gives you a chance to put the theory into practice, doesn't it?
A chance I could have done without. But I'll take a small side bet with you, Steed, even the old champagne supper, that there's a slight bruise over this dead man's heart.
John Steed, leaving Henry Boardman's exclusive dinner party, had had a most unpleasant experience in the garage at the base to the penthouse. 2 black leather-coated thugs on motorcycles had tried to run him down. One of them had died when his bike crashed into a packing case. The other had got away. Mrs. Peel, arriving on the scene, was able to give a little sympathy to Steed and suggested that they went back upstairs to the Boardmans. Steed preferred a quick visit to his broker, Brian Frederick Yule. Yule was dead. It seemed he'd died in exactly the same way as Todhunter. Steed had a lot to think about.
A lot to think about, Mrs. Peel.
Including Ruth Boardman?
How did you guess?
Well, you must have some evidence of her promiscuity. Other than first-hand experience, of course.
Oh, you flatter me. Yes, ever since I met her, I've been wondering where I'd seen her before. It was when I was lunching in the bar of the Bull and Bear. She was there, drinking with Ben Jager. She left before I went over to Jager. Strange. Odd relationship.
I can't think why. If Jager's one of Boardman's best clients, then it would be natural they should meet somewhere sometime.
Yet their attitude to each other seemed to be more than friendly, shall we say? I'd be prepared to bet that Henry Boardman doesn't know a darn thing about it. Well, it's just another thread in the mysterious tapestry. We'll both meet them all again very shortly.
Oh? When?
This wine-tasting do we've both been invited to in the cellars of the bank, remember? I'm quite looking forward to that.
The atmosphere in the wine cellars that Tuesday night was rather like a church. Elderly imbibers walked to and fro down the racks of cobwebbed and crusted bottles. John Harvey approached Mrs. Peel.
Which part of Barbados are you from, Mrs. Peel?
Do you know the island, Mr. Harvey?
I have a client who has a tobacco plantation there.
Oh, that'll be the south end of the island.
Yes, I believe it was.
Yes, I was at the north, among the non-smokers.
Oh, Mrs. Peel, good evening. Sparkling, refreshing, about a little on the frivolous side.
I am?
The wine, this Veuve de Velay. Would you like to try some?
Thank you. You know, I've got mixed feelings, Steed. Venerable yet devious. Ambivalent. It's not clear to me.
The wine?
No, the Boardmans. Everyone's friendly enough, but I get the feeling we're not trusted. Do you know what I mean?
I certainly do. I haven't really been trusted since Eton.
Steed, I'd like you to try this.
Oh, only if you'll do first service to me. Try this one.
Yeah, of course. An old friend, but not at his best. That 2.59.
10 out of 10.
Now, you tell me all about this.
Served on a silver tray, eh? I think you're trying to trap me.
Trap you? Now, why should I want to do that? Now, come along, taste it.
Steed lifted the glass, sniffed the wine, and allowed it to touch his lips.
I think we have him, John.
Well, Mr. Steed, your opinion?
Well, it's either a 65 Algerian red, or it's a Chateau Lafite Rothschild.
Yeah, that's better. But what year, Mr. Steed?
It's an old bouquet. Old, very old.
As though seeking back in the memory of time, Steed reached automatically in his pocket for his old Hunter watch. He said, looking at the time,
Pre-1418 war, rare vintage. Pre-1914 and yet no earlier than 1880.
Yeah, well, that still leaves you 34 years to play with, eh? Well?
1908?
Boardman looked pleased.
Would not be the year, no. 1909 from the northern end of the vineyard.
Yeah. Remarkable, Steed.
You have an extraordinary palate, Mr. Steed, for a
What is it you do?
Taste wines, what else?
You must have spent years in France.
No, merely an extended leave in Bordeaux. Guest of a former Minister of Agriculture. It rained non-stop. This left us time to enthuse over the achievements of his cellar rather than speculate on the uncertainties of the harvest. End of story.
I see.
I hope when the time comes you'll be equally forthcoming. Do you mind if I pass on? I am enjoying this. See you.
What Steed didn't know was that the whole scene in the cellar was being reflected upon a closed-circuit TV screen in a workshop not far away. A white-coated worker, Fitch, the resident genius of Warner's answering service, watched Steed at his wine-tasting triumph. When it came to the part where Steed consulted his gold watch, Fitch grinned and opened a drawer. He reached in and rummaged about until he extracted a hunter watch identical to Steed's.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly the same.
Fitch took up a long, thin blade and opened the back of the watch.
Should be easy. Dead easy.
Don't like that word dead, Steed. Better watch that watch. In the Boardman's parlour, Emma Peel was learning from John Harvey a little more about the art of big business investment.
Investment's not only a question of what to buy, Mrs. Peel, it's a question of when.
Buy when they're friendless. Isn't that what they say?
That's quite right, but who can tell when that is? Oh, excuse me. Yes?
Mr. Harvey, Mr. Warner to see you. Says from the answering service he has a parcel for you.
Oh, yes, that's right. Show him in, please. I won't be a moment, Mrs. Peel.
Harvey got up and walked the length of the long parlour. Mrs. Peel leant back in her chair, concealed from the door, and watched as Warner entered.
Good afternoon. I was on my way. I've another 2 calls to make, so I thought I'd drop this in. It's all there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Warner. Very kind of you, I'm sure.
Warner left, and Harvey came back to the desk carrying a parcel.
A consignment of new securities?
No, just a line Henry is trying to push amongst his friends, hoping they'll become interested and invest in the company. Oh, here, I'll show you. You may be interested.
Harvey tipped the contents of the parcel out onto the desk. They were the bleeper type of transistor receiver.
Oh, yes, I've seen these in work at hospitals. Ingenious.
Ready for some tea, Mrs. Peel?
Oh, what a nice idea. Thank you.
This way, then. Come along, John.
Thanks.
Time for tea.
Right.
Mrs. Peel followed the 2 men into the other office. The door closed. A few moments later, Ruth Boardman entered the parlour cautiously. She walked up to the desk, ignored the bleepers, and searched amongst the wrapping paper. Eventually, she found what she was looking for. She unfolded the tissue paper.
Here it is. A gold hunter watch. The replica of John Steed.
Later that night in his flat, John Steed was setting his watch to the chimes of Big Ben. Having done this, he carefully arranged his tie. Standing in front of the mirror with the contents of his pocket on the occasional table, he checked.
Change. Keys. Handkerchief. Doorbell. Coming! Oh, Mrs. Boardman. And looking like someone straight off the Champs-Élysées.
Thank you, Mr. Steed. May I come in?
Please do.
Your apartment is much as I imagined it.
The very fact that you imagined it at all intrigues me.
I have come to thank you for your tact. The fact that you saw me lunching with a younger man. But you see, when your husband is so many years older than you are...
Oh, I understand.
The fact that you are even seen with a well-known, almost infamous character like Ben Jago, well, it could easily be misunderstood, misinterpreted.
Mrs. Boardman moved to the table that contained Steed's things.
Oh, think nothing of it, Mrs. Boardman. You're a merchant banker's wife. Mr. Jago is an investor. It seems a perfectly natural liaison.
As I said, you are very tactful.
Oh, not tactful. Optimistic. You see, I always admire a woman with a past.
What is optimistic about it?
Well, just the hope that history can be persuaded to repeat itself.
I think you'd better offer me a drink, don't you? John?
Of course. Make yourself at home, Ruth.
And give her a heaven-sent opportunity to switch those watches. Not very bright tonight, Steed, are you? To all outward appearances, John Steed was content to allow his relationship with Henry Boardman, the merchant banker, to continue in a spirit of friendly competition. Boardman had recognized that Steed knew wines and was able to name most of the rare ones by taste. Steed also respected Boardman as a tough, conservative banker of the old school. But Steed wasn't sure how much Boardman was implicated in the deaths of 6 company chairmen. It looked as though Steed was going to sit back and let things work themselves out. He had a date with Mrs. Peel in the Bull and Bear that night, and dressed for it leisurely after Mrs. Boardman had left. But Mrs. Peel wasn't so casual. She was sure there was far more to learn from the premises of Warner's answering service, and she chose the cover of darkness to get into the building.
The workshop, all right. Kinky one, too.
Mrs. Peel found herself in Fitch's workshop, which was lined with clocks, but none of them going. A large TV screen dominated the workbench, plenty of papers stacked around, and a series of photographs. Mrs. Peel flipped through them.
One of Steed. One of Steed, a blown-up photograph of Steed with a wine glass in his hand, and his gold watch in the other one. Oh, when could this have been taken? Got it. That wine-tasting party in Boardman's cellar. A close-up of Steed's watch. Oh, this must have been taken from that TV screen and then enlarged. But why?
Well. Interesting, isn't it? Don't move. I've a revolver at your head.
Fitch, Steed's watch. You've done something to Steed's watch.
Next time he opens it, it'll be the last time he opens it. He'll press the cover, which protects the face of the watch. The cover will spring open, and that'll be that. You like my workshop?
I neither like it nor understand it.
My clocks are on the walls. Each one represents a person. This one I shall dedicate to John Steed. It's pretty, isn't it? I shall wind it up later and stop it as soon as Steed is dead. At the exact moment he dies. It'll be a sort of monument to him. And to my ingenuity, of course. You see, for most people, life is ruled by time. They are, you know, except for me. I rule time. And time, the time that's allotted to Steed, is limited. Strictly limited. Like all these other clocks. That one's Todhunter's. That one's Yule's.
And 5 others? All those company chairmen?
Yes, of course. One doesn't get so much opportunity in peacetime. The war now. That was my bumper harvest. 8 panzer officers in one night. 8. And an Italian captain. That's his clock. There. 3:45 in the morning. It's 3:45 a.m. Now, if promotion could have been won through that sort of pleasure, he would have been a field marshal. They were happy days.
You're quite a dealer in death, aren't you, Mr. Fitch?
Dealer in death. I like that. But now...
What's wrong? Losing your nerve?
I've never killed a woman before. Silly to be so squeamish. I'll use something subtle. Perhaps an ultrasonic injection. They don't even perforate the skin. Or a tasteless poison. It's an old favourite of mine. But it must be neat, clean and quick. Oh, yes, I must have my murders neat. That's most essential. So don't worry too much. You'll hardly feel a thing. I promise you.
In the bar of the Bull and Bear, a waiter served John Steed with a balloon glass of brandy and removed the empty one.
You sure there haven't been any messages?
No messages, Mr. Steed.
You've checked?
I've double-checked.
No lady named Mrs. Peel?
No, sir, no one of that name.
Steed slipped a hand into his pocket and drew out the watch. But before he could attempt to open it, the waiter said...
It's 9.5, sir. You should get the Wall Street closing prices if you're interested.
Oh, thank you.
Steed slipped the watch back into his waistcoat pocket and sipped his brandy reflectively. Then he took out the watch again and gave it a good, hard look. Catching on, Steed? The lights weren't full on in Henry Boardman's penthouse, just one small table light by an easy chair. There were footsteps outside. The door to the main lounge opened. Ruth Boardman entered, switched on the light.
You... Oh, what are you doing here?
John Steed was sitting in the chair, idly swinging his watch from the end of its chain.
I hope you don't mind my intruding. I told your manservant it would be all right. I thought I'd like to repay your call. You left so abruptly after your drink. Also, I wanted to see your husband.
Henry, he isn't here.
Ruth Boardman's eyes hardly left the watch as Steed continued to swing it to and fro.
Not in? Oh, too bad. It's nothing terribly important. Just I thought I'd drop by and maybe sample another glass of that excellent brandy.
Well, yes, of course.
Mrs. Boardman, is something wrong? You look quite pale.
Mr. Steed, John, I'm very tired.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Where is your husband?
Oh, he's dining out.
And when do you expect him back?
10, 11, I don't know.
Steed started fiddling with the watch again. Eventually he stood up and prepared to open the watch, saying,
10 o'clock, you say, but surely it's nearly that now. Let's see.
No, you mustn't open that.
Mrs. Boardman stepped forward and grabbed Steed's wrist.
No. Do you mind telling me why not, Mrs. Boardman?
Caught her there, all right, didn't you, Steed? Fitch, in his workshop, wound up the clock dedicated to John Steed and placed it on the bench. He then started working on the inside of an antique shepherdess clock. There was a sudden coded ring at the door.
What the devil can that be?
Mr. Fitch, good evening. May I come in? Yes, this is the place, all right. Your name's been recommended to me.
Oh, what for?
I've had some sort of trouble with my watch. A golden hunter watch, you know the model?
What sort of trouble?
Can't seem to open it.
Why not?
The button that releases the gold outer cover is stuck.
Steed reached into his pocket, produced the watch, and swung it to the full length of its chain.
Here, you have a go.
Fitch backed away, a frightened expression on his face.
It might just be stuck. I can't think how it happened. I'm sure if you had a try.
But Fitch continued to retreat. Steed suddenly stopped swinging the watch and caught it neatly with the other hand. He made to press the button that opened the outer cover. Fitch gave a yell.
No!
And dived for cover. Steed pressed the button, and the cover swung open.
A little off-key, wouldn't you say?
At that moment, a loud bumping noise drowned the sound from the watch.
Why don't you come out from behind that workbench and answer the cupboard door? Most inhospitable. Oh, very well.
Steed crossed the floor and unlocked the door of the cupboard. Mrs. Peel fell into the room.
Mrs. Peel. Barbados 1 minute, room cupboard the next.
Oh, Steed, for heaven's sake, untie my hands.
But before he could do so...
Steed, watch it! Fitch, what's he got?
Bicycle pump gun. McNee used them during the war.
I invented it, Steed. It's neat and tidy, just as I told you, Mrs. Peel.
Steed looked at Fitch, who was covering them as though he was holding a Sten gun. The clock Fitch had started was nearly at 11 o'clock.
Oh, well done, Major. You got here just in time.
You don't think I'm going to be caught by that old trick?
A clock beginning to strike distracted Fitch. Steed leapt forward and grabbed the pump. Fitch held on grimly, using the pump as a lever. Steed swung Fitch round and crashed him against the wall. The pump gun landed in Fitch's middle and exploded. Fitch's body, thrown back by the explosion, toppled over, crashing all his clocks to the floor. There was silence.
Tempus fugit.
How did you find me? I mean, find out about him.
Ruth Boardman.
Just like that?
Yes, and a modicum of charm, of course. The bleepers. Fitch fixed them all, of course.
Of course. Anyone ringing the right channel caused the bleep and also caused a capillary needle to jump into the heart of the man who was wearing the bleeper. Neat, no fuss.
Neat, no fuss. Yes, that gives me an idea. See you later.
Hey! Hey, where are you going? What about me? Let me loose. Hey, Steed!
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Nearly forgot my umbrella. Bye for now. See you.
Hey, Steed! Come back! Come back, Steed! Come back!
In In their own ways, John Steed and Mrs. Peel had both found out who it was who'd invented the unique method of killing by using the transistor bleepers. He was Fitch, the mechanical genius of Warner's answering service. They'd all met up in Fitch's workshop, where Mrs. Peel was being held prisoner. Fitch had attacked Steed with another of his inventions, a nasty, lethal pump gun. And in the ensuing struggle, the gun had gone off and Fitch was killed. Steed was glad he was out of the way, but what about the brains behind it all? Leaving Mrs. Peel to take care of herself, Steed took a taxi to think things out.
Warner owns Warner's answering service. And there's Henry Boardman, the merchant banker, losing ground in business and already lost his wife. John Harvey, Boardman's partner. And, of course, Ben Jago, the unscrupulous financier. One of them, or all of them? I'll have to find out. Well, first find your pigeons and then put a cat amongst them.
For the next few hours, Steed worked quite hard, visiting people who didn't know they were visited. Next morning, Warner entered his office and changed into his working coat. There was a bulge in the top pocket.
What the devil? Who the devil put this here?
Warner, with a puzzled air, discarded the bleeper. In his penthouse, Henry Boardman was finishing breakfast. He removed his glasses and went to place them in the top pocket of his jacket.
What's this? It's an extraordinary thing.
Boardman placed the bleeper he'd found in his pocket on the breakfast table with an air of genuine amazement. Later, in the Boardman parlour, John Harvey seated himself at his desk and pulled a rose out of the bowl in front of him. He was about to thread it into his buttonhole when he spotted the bleeper in his pocket.
Ah! Somebody having a joke. Or is this a trick?
He ripped the bleeper from his pocket and threw it on the desk in a fury. Much later, in the bar of the Bull and Bear, Ben Jago sat reading a newspaper and sipping a glass of wine. He spilled some and reached for a pocket handkerchief and found the bleeper.
So, I'm the next one to be got rid of, am I? Well, we'll soon see about that.
Jago got up and, without waiting to finish his wine, left the bar. As you say, Steed, cat among the pigeons, all right. Later, Henry Boardman was searching John Harvey's desk, pulling papers out of drawers indiscriminately. Harvey's voice on a dictaphone played back all the time.
The case for long-term equity investment has never been stronger. Inflation is as much a part of our life as bread and butter. Each year, the purchasing power of the pound grows weaker. Alternative forms of investment do not counteract the erosion in value of invested capital. And that's the end of tape one. All right, Harvey, stay right where you are in that chair, nice and still.
Jago. So you're in this too. And you're armed, I see.
Where's Harvey? I thought he...
I don't know. I took the opportunity while he was out of searching this desk. There's nothing here, nothing on the dictaphone tapes to incriminate him either. But I know the truth. I can't believe it. Using this bank, Boardman's, as a cover for murder, fraud.
How did you find out?
Ruth told me. She broke down after a visit from that man, John Steed. She told me it was all Harvey's doing. She didn't mention you. But of course, I should have realized that you were in it. All your lucky investments.
I wanted to cut you in.
Now, you flatter me, thinking I was that sort of a man. Well, what happens now?
Every man has his price. What's yours?
I'm too old to turn crooked. I leave that to the younger, frustrated people. Like my wife.
Then that means we shall have to part company, doesn't it?
Henry! Ben, what are you doing?
You can see exactly what he's doing, Ruth. He's about to add another murder to his list of crimes.
No, Ben!
That's all you're doing. If you'd kept your mouth shut.
But Steed knows there's only one thing to do. Get out!
And leave your worthy husband to betray us both, oh no.
Ben, put that gun down. Put it down.
Out of my way. Stand away from him, do you hear me?
No!
John Steed and Emma Peel, visiting the Boardman offices later, found ample evidence of Jago's visit.
I think the term is foul play, Mrs. Peel.
Blood. The point is, whose?
Well, my guess is Boardman's. Now, if you wanted to hide a body or bodies in this place, What spot would you choose?
Something nasty in the wine cellar, Steed?
Shouldn't be surprised, Mrs. Peel. Shouldn't be surprised at all. Only one way to find out, isn't there?
And down in the wine cellar, Jago and Harvey confronted each other.
I had to do it. I didn't intend to shoot her, just to silence him. She interfered. I thought when I found that reaper in my pocket that you...
You decided to get rid of you, too, huh? It might not have been a bad idea at that. No, not guilty.
But somebody planted it on me.
Someone planted one on me as well. There's no prize for the answer.
John Steed.
Somebody mentioned my name.
Steed.
Welcome to the gathering, Steed. The proverbial bad penny.
Well, it was the Chateau Rothschild. I just couldn't stay away.
Steed, how did you know?
About wines? Oh, I was weaned on Chablis. Wine's become a habit ever since.
It's a pity. One shouldn't overindulge in the good things of life.
Such as company chairman, for instance?
What are we going to do?
Quiet, Jago. Oh, you do know my colleague, don't you?
Mr. Jago, the king of the option market. Oh, yes. Pity about Ruth Boardman, Jago. She was a fascinating woman in many ways.
You're becoming an awful nuisance, Steed.
Well, I do my best to oblige.
Men of integrity need careful handling.
Oh, every time.
But in the final analysis, everyone is corruptible.
You think so? Henry Boardman wasn't. But then perhaps Jago didn't offer him the correct incentives.
Maybe not. Everyone, I think, has their price.
Don't try it, Harvey. It won't work.
I can handle it. I've handled everything else.
Well, rather badly, if I may be allowed to say so.
What?
But while we're talking and not drinking, can't I...
Stay where you are.
Steed turned, as though surprised, to find himself looking down the wrong end of a revolver. Jago's finger tightened over the trigger. Mrs. Peel, who was standing behind some wine casks, thought it about time to join the action. She rolled a barrel into the back of Jago's leg. The cask caught Jago under the knees and knocked him over. The gun fell to the ground. Harvey dived for it, got to it before Steed. Steed dodged behind the wine racks.
Don't let them reach the door, Jago. Right. There, in the wine racks. You go this way. I'll take the other side. Can't get out. Cut off their way to the door. Right.
The two men moved cautiously forward. Mrs. Peel tripped over an empty bottle.
Waste.
Steed seized a magnum of champagne by its neck.
That's about the right weight.
Jago crept forward. Steed waited, and then hit him.
Didn't even break. Good year.
Mrs. Peel was tackling Harvey and was at a decided disadvantage.
Can only have one bullet left. That's if I can still count. Here goes. No more danger.
Mrs. Peel leapt forward. Harvey swung round and fired. Several times on empty chambers, Mrs. Peel closed in, gripped him. Mrs. Peel got a good hold, threw Harvey over the cask.
Well thrown, Mrs. Peel. Care to share a glass of champagne?
Well, it has been thirsty work.
Now, let me choose wisely.
No.
Watch it, Steed. Jago's coming too.
Steed, who had been opening the champagne, turned the bottle on Jago.
Here, old chap, try this. Bit on the dry side, but a very adaptable wine. Finish him off, Mrs. Peel, then we'll finish this.
Later, in a taxi, going home.
I make no apology for helping myself to a crate or two. Here. Tell me, what do you think of it?
A claret with unusual body. The Bordeaux district.
You amaze me. You're right.
A little village at Saint-Péréon. This would be from the De Vere vineyard. Mérion Saint-Clair. Let's see. 1931.
Fantastic. Emma, my dear, how'd you do it?
I read the label on the bottle.
Shield gives a confidence that actually shows
in your eyes.
Put Put on Shield deodorant and it's dry in seconds. That's the way it stays right through the day. Shield never makes you feel sticky. It just protects you and keeps you dry, feminine, fresh. Wear Shield, and the only thing you show is confidence.
Shield gives a confidence that actually shows.
In your eyes, in your eyes.
The cleaning power of cold water Omo gives you the superb cleanness you want from a washing powder. Listen to Mrs. Baxter of Claremont.
It really is good, you know. I mean, it's unbelievable, really, that it could be so good, you know.
Once an Omo user, always an Omo user.
The Avengers.
Listen every evening, Monday to Friday, to John Steed and Emma Peel, The Avengers, brought to you by the makers of Cold Water Omo.